So what we're doing today is very similar to what we did yesterday. Now, on the assignment, you're going to be finding the center of the circle, the radius, and the equation of the circle. So we're going to find center, radius, and equation of the circle. But once we find the center and radius, it's just plugging it in at that point. And our general equation of the circle is our x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where h and k are the values for the center of the circle. Now let's see what information they gave us to start with. They told us that the circle that has -1, 1 and 5, 7 as endpoints of a diameter. So what that's told us is that we have a circle, and these 2 points are the endpoints of the diameter. So going all the way across, so 2 points on the circle. So neither one of these, unlike some of the ones we had yesterday, neither one of these is the center. But the diameter of a circle goes through the center, yes? And the diameter is twice the radius. So the center of the circle should be the point that is exactly in the middle. The center will be in the exact middle of these two here. So what we can do is use the midpoint formula. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and our y1 plus y2 divided by 2 to find the midpoint. And once we get this xy value, that will be the center of the circle. So looking at this here, the 2 points that are given, what are our two x values? Well, we have -1 and 5. Well, -1 plus 5 is, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the x value of the center is 2. Any questions on this so far? Now we also need to find the y value of the center. And our two y values are, so we'd have 1 plus -7, which would be -6 divided by 2 is -3. So our center is at the point 2, -3. Any questions on this so far? Now in the formula, we can go on and update it. This x minus h, well, h is 2, plus y minus k, well, that'd be minus -3, yes? So it'd be plus 3 squared. Because I feel at this point, recognizing a negative and negative makes a positive, we can go on and plug that in. So what are we missing? The radius. Now we can use the distance formula and these 2 points to find the radius. Now, let me get a highlighter. If I use -1, 1 and 5, -7, will I get the radius? What are those 2 points? And the diameter is what? Twice the radius. So would that give me the radius? No, it would give me the diameter. And we could use that in the distance formula, but what would we have to do at the end? We'd have to divide it by 2 to get what the radius is. Because the radius is what? The distance from the center to a point And I mean, at this point, we don't have the center, do we? We do. We now have it now. So what I could do is one of two things. I could use the two endpoints of the diameter and find out what that distance is and divide it by 2. Or we could use the center in one of those 2 points and just find the radius. Which one do we want to do? Okay. So what we can do is say one of the x values is 2 minus, what's the other x value? So -1, which would turn it to plus 1. Plus, what would the 2 y values be? -3 minus 1. Because once we decided to use the center, we have to use 2 and -3. 2 for our x, -3 for the y. And since we chose -1 for the x, we have to pick 1 for the y. We have to use those 2 points. Now at this point here, again, just like we did yesterday, you can type this whole thing into the calculator, hit enter, and it will give you your answer. If I do this by hand, 2 plus 1 is going to give us 3 squared. -3 minus 1 is going to give us -4 squared. Now 3 squared is 9. -4 squared is going to be positive 16, which tells us that we have a diameter of the square root, or distance of the square root of 25, which is 5. So our radius is 5. If we'd found the diameter, it would have told us it was 10. Then we would have divided it by 2 to get the radius. Yep. Now we need to plug it into our formula, which would be, what is 5 squared? So really, this is, so this right here is the equation, and again on the homework, it's going to be asking for all 3 parts, the center, radius, and the equation itself. Questions on this here? We ready for the next one? The endpoints of a circle are 6, -8, and -4, 16. Find the center and the radius of the circle, and then find its equation. So we're finding the center. Radius. And then we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to our radius squared, yes? So the first thing we can do is find the midpoint of these two here, because the midpoint is going to be the center. And just like with our distance formula for midpoint, the order of x and y doesn't matter. We just need to make sure we have the x's together and the y's together. So our 2 x values are plus -4. Now 6 plus -4 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is, so the x value of the center is 1, which means down here we're going to have x minus 1 squared. And the nice thing with this here is if it had turned out to be, say, -1, it's very easy to change the subtraction sign into addition sign. We just have to put a line. Now with the y values, we have -8 plus 16 divided by 2. And most likely at this point you would have typed it into the calculator to get your answer. If we did it by hand, 2, which is 4. So we could put it in both its spots, because the center would be the 0.14, and half of our equation is going to be x minus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared. Now we just need to find the radius. Any questions on this here before we find the radius? There we go. And I have a feeling for the radius, we're going to use the distance formula with the points 1, 4, and which other point? Yeah, which one do we want to use? So 6 and negative 8. So we'd have 1 minus 6 squared plus 4 minus, not 16. So 4 minus negative 8 or 4 plus 8, either will work, especially if you're typing it into the calculator. One minus 6 squared would be 5 squared. 4 plus 8 squared would be 12 squared. And I have a feeling you're going to get 13. 5 squared is going to be 25. 12 squared is 144. Which tells us that that distance would be 169, which is indeed 13. Yes? Well, it would be negative 5. Sorry. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference, but yes, it's good to be correct mathematically. So that should be negative 5. But luckily, it didn't change the outcome. We still get 13 as the radius. And what would 13 squared be? 169. And that's it. Questions on any of this here? And isn't it kind of interesting? Let me grab a highlighter. That the number that goes here is the same as the number that went right here. Because what are we doing? We're taking the square root of 169. Yes? We're trying to see what number times itself is 169. When we're squaring it, we're multiplying that number by itself. So we're kind of undoing it. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, especially if this doesn't simplify, it leaves it as that, that's fine. Because once we square it, that square root's going to go away. Any other questions on this here? Now that leaves us with the last two, yes? Last three. Okay. How do we feel about these here? Do we want to look at one more, or y'all feel comfortable with these? We're good with this here? Okay. Because if y'all feel comfortable with this, I have a feeling that seeing one more is not going to make any difference. Y'all have understood it as best as y'all probably are going to. Now, we can have decimals and fractions, but it won't make a difference. It's the same exact thing. So